Let's get started. So, welcome. Thank you, everybody, for coming on today. I just wanted to share a few ideas with you about, from a leadership perspective, in terms of, you know, sort of creating and keeping, increasing the speed of your team. And want to share some ideas here. And I'm going to be packaging a complete leadership program around this in the future as well. But I found that, oftentimes when you think about today, the speed of business is going faster and faster. And so we all have to increase our speed, both individually and collectively as a team. But why are we increasing the speed? Is that people really want to create the future faster. And we want to get to that future faster. And we only get there is when we bring the team together with us. In other words, if we try to do everything by ourselves, it's never going to happen. They always say success is a team sport. And so we need to learn to let go, and so that we can deliver the future faster. But we need our people to own that future with us. So they'll be able to help us make that happen, and much, much faster too. So I'm going to share some ideas with you. I'm going to talk a lot about, yourself as well, because in terms, we tend to slow our team down. I'll talk about some ways to lead to get your people to take more ownership and be with you that way. And a little bit about, what are the key things in terms of really being able to move faster and continue to move faster at the end. So you'll get the slides at the end of today as well, and you'll get a handout with summarizing some of the key slides and so forth, as well as takeaways and that. I might ask you some questions via the chat function as we go through, and please feel free to raise your hand or put a question in the chat, and I'll try to cover those. But I'll reserve some time at the end so that we can have some Q&A as well. But the key thing here is it all starts with you. And I found that, it's so important, to lead a team, to create the success, but also enjoy the success as well. I think a best definition of success I ever heard is this. Success is achieving what you want and enjoying the trip, right? Achieving what you want and enjoying the trip. So, if you don't enjoy the trip, the achievement doesn't taste as sweet. And if you enjoy the trip, but you have no achievements, you're not using your potential. So a lot of things start with you. And in fact, in leadership, it all starts with you as well. It starts with what you do, but a mindset of thinking about others. And it comes all the way back to quantum physics and those type of things. I read an interesting book years ago, and it talked about a test they did in a lab. They put a strand of DNA, a hair, into a vacuum tube. And then they monitored all the photons, or, the electricity around that. And all the photons formed around the DNA. Then they pulled the DNA out of the vacuum tube, and they thought that all the photons would go dispersed again, but they stayed where they were. And so there's an element here, is that we have an impact on others that lasts after we leave. And that it's not just, the impact we make emotionally in our communications, but there's something from a quantum physics perspective that we have that. And you notice that sometimes when certain people enter the room lights up, and certain people enter the room and it goes dark, because they have a personality that you just don't want to be around. But what I'd like to say is that, leadership is about others, but you never impact others without starting with yourself first. Okay. So that's what we're going to talk about a lot today, with respect to being able to let go and grab more life. So think about this too. If success is a team effort and success is a team sport, it doesn't always have to be you. Right now, the key thing, a lot of times people are taking vacations these times, and if you can't take your vacation without being on your phone and always being linked to the office and so forth, you're really not letting go. And also, you're not trusting your people with the future, because you can't even trust them for a couple weeks to be when you're away. I was doing a session on Tuesday, and the person said, oh, I'm going away for 3 weeks now, first time in 10 years. And I don't know how I'm going to survive because I don't know how the office will survive without me and so forth. You can never take a great vacation and enjoy it unless you're willing to share power and let go. And that what's important about letting go is micromanagement comes with a speed limit. When you try to tell people what to do all the time, you're operating to your head capacity to keep everything straight and tell them what to do. You're not using the capacity in your team. So if you think about it, if you want your people to help you create the future faster, you have to make the future feel theirs as well. It's not just yours, it has to feel theirs, and you have to involve them, and you can't be a micromanager. You can look at a micromanager another way. Micromanagers are like individual contributors with more arms and legs because you're not asking people to think, you're just telling them what to do. So if you want to go faster, you certainly don't want everybody running at your pace and your ability to tell everybody what to do. You want to trigger them and keep them and get them off and running. So it has to do with your ability to let go. And that's really, really the key thing if you really want a lot of speed. Because if you're running a large organization, it can't be coming down to just your speed and your ability to be around all the time and tell people what to do. So there's three main reasons to let go, but I want to ask you a question, and I'd like you to type your answer into the chat function. I think over the years now, I've done 15 leadership sessions purely on letting go. And I start the session out having everybody brainstorm all the reasons why they don't let go. Okay, they brainstorm all the reasons why they don't let go. And I want to ask you this question. Type your answer into the chat function. What percentage do you think of all the reasons why they didn't let go had to do with just themselves? It didn't have to do with, having the wrong people, the wrong environment, in the wrong market, all these other things. How much do you think had to do with just themselves? So we have 60, 75, 99, 85, 50, quite big numbers there, right? It's always been between 80 and 90%. So a lot of times you get people give reasons. Oh, I don't have the right people. They're not experienced enough, et cetera, et cetera. Most of the reasons have nothing to do with other people. They have to do with ourselves, our own insecurities, and our own thought about what leadership is or what leadership isn't. Okay. So what I'd like to do is quickly go through the three main reasons. Okay. These are the three main reasons that people don't let go. First reason is you like doing it too much yourself. Okay. You like doing it too much yourself, so you don't want to give it to others. I tell you, my biggest disappointment in leadership is when my boss would never delegate something to me because they like doing it too much themselves. Let me ask you a question here. Type your answer into the chat function. Is leadership always a fun job? Is it a fun job to do? Type in yes or no. Is it always a fun job to do? Yeah, you're all saying no, right? So it's not so fun all the time, right? So you want to have fun, you drop down, you start doing some of the things you like doing. But if you're doing those, you're preventing your people from growing. Okay. And we'll come back and talk in more detail on this in a minute. The second reason is you need to feel in control. Oftentimes, you don't delegate because the person isn't capable. You don't delegate as much because you need to know everything in order to feel in control. So if you need to be involved and know everything to feel in control, then you will get involved and you'll try to know everything to do that. Now, if knowing everything was the key to success, the librarians would be the most successful people in the world, but it doesn't work that way. It's what you do with what you know that's there. Okay. So it's very interesting. Many years ago, Henry Ford, who started Ford Motor Company, was sued for libel and he was on the witness stand, and they're asking him lots of questions, basic questions like, do you know the price of a quart of milk? Do you know this? You know that? He says, believe me, for my success and what I need to do in the company, I don't need to know those things. He says, I have a phone in my office. Whatever I don't need to know, I can pick up and call the person. Okay. So, if you need to feel in control, if you need to know it to feel in control, no matter how intellectually it doesn't make sense, you will get involved more because you need that feeling. And then the third reason why you don't let go, and I hear this quite often, surprisingly, from mid-level or higher level managers in companies, is, oh boy, if I let go, what will I do? I don't know what I do if I let go. So the thing is that your job, you should be doing your job versus your people's job. And if you think about climbing, you're going to climb faster doing your job than your people's job. And so, think of another way. Sometimes people micromanage because it's an easier way to lead and manage people. Because if you micromanage, you just wait for the questions and just answer. So the work actually comes to you. But if you're a leader and you're trying to delegate and let your people run, you have to do a lot of things up front in order to delegate, create the right culture, and so forth. So in essence, in this way, leadership is very much front-loaded work. Micromanagement, you don't have to do that front-loaded work. You just wait for people to ask you the question, you tell them what to do. So keep in mind these three as we go. And, the thing about this is that you're always going to have to be working on these things because our own human nature and everything is we want to get more involved in things like that. But think of it this way too. The more involved we get, or in other words, the more we get into something, the more human nature is we want to control it. So it is oftentimes it's asking the questions at the right level. Okay. So just quickly, let's go through the three that I just talked about. The first one is really about you being able to lead from your sweet spot. Your sweet spot is the intersection of your passion, your strengths, and the impact or value you have with those. So, whenever you're in your sweet spot, you tend to like doing that and you're tend to good at. And here's a tip for you if you want to understand if you're in your sweet spot or not. Think about a day when you had very challenging problems to solve, but you left work or you finished your work, if you're working at home, whatever, with more energy to go do other things. You were probably working in your sweet spot, something you're passionate about and something you're good at. Because when you're in your sweet spot, work doesn't drain you, you gain energy by doing it. But the thing is that the ultimate sweet spot is in the green circle there. That's where you make the biggest impact as a leader. So you think about it, continually as we climb, we have to let go of things that we used to like to do. Because if we're doing that, we're probably doing something our people could do, and we're disappointing them. So in essence, it's very interesting, but if you're in your sweet spot, especially in the red area to like doing, you're probably in your comfort zone. So we have to kind of always continually leave our comfort zone and establish a new comfort zone where we make a bigger impact. And I think that's really important, is that we should be constantly letting go of something in the red and moving and growing and learning and doing something in that green in order to stay in the sweet spot where we make the biggest impact with others. Okay. So remember this, if you're holding on to something as a leader too long because you like doing it, you're never going to grow. And I had some leaders sometimes say that to me. I had a boss, a CEO of a furniture company, says, I always still call on the top 5 customers that we have. I love dealing with them. I know I shouldn't be doing it because I could be focusing on other things, but that's what I really like about my job. Okay. So question for you. If you want your team to go faster, what are you doing today that you like doing that they could do, and you should stop doing that and focusing on bigger things? Okay. So that's the first question there. Now, the second thing we talked about was you feeling in control. So the thing is, how should you feel in control? You shouldn't feel in control just by knowing everything. you should feel in control by trusting people. Giving people the accountability, trusting them to deal with it and to come to you if there's an issue. So the very best leaders who can run fast and allow their people to run faster, they gain control by trusting people versus knowing everything. Okay. And as I said before, the more you try to know, the more human nature is we want to control what we know. So here's a great question for you to ask yourself. What don't you need to know? And what should you be relying on your people to know? And then that when you need to, you can ask the right questions. So in essence, what I found in leadership, oftentimes the power of a great leader is not what you know. It's knowing enough to ask the right questions to know what you need to know when you need to know it. Okay. So what I found in leadership is that you don't need to know the absolute detail all the time, but you need to know enough to ask the right questions of your people, because it's your questions that will enable them to take more ownership for it, but it's your questions that will help them grow and look beyond as well. Okay. So think of it this way too, is if you're trying to tell your people what to do all the time, as you climb, your way is out of date too. So, keep in mind that in terms of yourself. Okay, let me just open it up just quickly. Any key comments or questions so far on what we covered? Okay, there was a comment there about, inheriting people from another leader. That's the biggest issue we have when we go into new teams. We don't have the people we would have hired. We have the people that the previous person hired. And I just give you a tip. One of the things we're always going to have is people that are really bad or more sort of the manipulators that no leader before you wanted to deal with. And now they just pass it on to the next person, because basically sometimes leaders say, I'm only going to be in this job 18 months. Can I live with this person? And then I'll pass the problem on to my successor. So the third thing is, about leadership is not about you doing it. It's about your people doing it. So leadership really is about enabling others versus you. So you have to push your ego aside. And here's the thing, you should get a bigger buzz seeing your people do it than you do it, because then you're going to let go and you're not going to get your buzz by you doing it, but seeing your people do it well. And success is really, really a team sport. And so the more you do that, the better you are. Now, there's a great phrase here, which I think also you should think about if you really want to go fast, is that as a leader, you're not responsible for your people, you're responsible to your people, right? You can't take responsibility for another person. You're responsible to enable them to do their best, but you're not responsible for everything that they necessarily do all the time and so forth. So I found it's a great distinction. Here's a reason why too, is that as a leader, if you take on all the problems of your people on you and you feel responsible for everything, it's going to slow you down. When you think responsible to your people, you're doing everything you can to enable them. You're not going to take all their problems back on you. You are going to be helping them solve their own problems versus you try to solve them for them. In fact, that happened to me one time. I was doing a CEO mentoring group, and at the end, they were doing some peer coaching. And the company I was doing this with too, they brought some of their younger leaders in. And one of their younger leaders said, I'm asking lots of questions of my people. And then through coaching, she realized she was asking questions so that she could solve the problems for her people. She wasn't asking questions so that they could solve their own problems. So what I'd say is that to take some of the burden off of yourself, don't think of leadership as you're responsible for people. Think of leadership as you're responsible to people. Okay. So those are the three particular reasons why you don't let go. Okay, the reasons why, as we summarize, you like doing it too much yourself, or you need to feel in control so you get involved, or you figured out that my job is not doing it anymore. My job is enabling the doing versus the doing. Now, a couple questions to ask yourself on this one. Okay, and this is where I get a sense sometime when I see that people don't let go. How do you judge people if they're doing it the right way? Okay, do you judge it if they're doing it my way? So it must be okay. Or if they're not doing it the way I would have done it, it can't be okay. You have to judge your people. Is their way of creating what you want to achieve or not? You can't judge them based on the way you would have done it. And you think about it, as you climb, your way is more out of date. So what I would say is that, how you judge your people and things are going well, it shouldn't be judged based on the way you would have done it, but you have to allow them to do it their way. And as I said, as we climb, our way is much more out of date. And so what I'd say is turn off that quick judgment thing we tend to do, is that we're always comfortable when people do things our way, and we're uncomfortable when they do it a different way. Turn it off and just say, is it achieving what you want people to achieve or not? Okay, so that's one question to always put in your mind, and allow for their way and what is possible within the team, not just what you think is possible based on your previous experience. Now, the other question here is a very interesting one. Okay, and I actually asked this question. I was doing 3 levels of a company: the top management team, the directors, and the managers below. And I asked all of them this question: do you get promoted based on doing your job or doing your people's job? Okay, the first 2 levels said doing my job. The top management team said doing both. So you can imagine that this one was probably going to be micromanaging, right? So the thing is that you get promoted doing more of your job. Whenever you end up doing your people's job, there's a tendency now you will stay there and continue to micromanage them that way. Okay, so a good question to ask yourself, and do a reflection question at the end of your week and say, was I doing more of my job, or was I doing more of my people's job? If you're doing more of your job, you're going to be definitely much more calmer. You're going to be definitely much more future oriented, and you'll be pulling your people towards where you want them to go. If you're in the middle of them, just telling them what to do all the time, you're definitely not pulling them to the future faster. And as I said before, you need to get a greater buzz seeing your people do it versus you do it. Okay. So those are 2 key questions to think about yourself. So a lot of this is about how you look at your own leadership, how you look at what you like to do, how you look at how you feel in control, and how you look at your job. What is my leadership job? I mean, am I supposed to be the doing or not? And believe me, your people aren't really focused as much on you doing their job. They want to keep growing so that you give them the opportunity to use their potential. So a lot of times people say, if I don't get involved, my people, think I'm not doing anything. Believe me, I don't care if my boss was involved or not, as long as I can keep growing and looking at and getting opportunities. Now, if I'm not growing and not getting opportunities, then I'm looking to my boss for something different. Okay, so gives you some ideas there. Now, just open it up anyway. Any comments, questions on what we covered so far? It's so much about you that could be slowing your team down. Just open it up. Anybody have anything? You could open your mic and share.
Yeah, Mark. One thing I hear you what you say about letting go also of the things you enjoy doing, but there is also that element of keeping joy in your work. And I also notice it for myself. I think generally I'm pretty good, but every so often I'll take a kind of passion project just to keep myself also excited and motivated.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, everybody, has that, I want to still have fun in those things and that. And I think you have to fall in love with the vision that you're trying to drive, because definitely there's going to be struggle and things like that. But there's another point is, if you look at very, very good leaders, they have really, really passionate hobbies, because their hobbies is when they refuel for get back into the leadership, right? And so what I think I found when I work with very good leaders is they're in love with the future they want to create, right? And then they're accepting some of the struggles along the way. They're accepting some things there too. But, if you think about it, and if you think about where you are in your career, and you think back when you had the best times in jobs, it was in what you were trying to achieve, and it was some of the key people you surrounded yourself with. That team around you created the energy. So I'd say is that if you're not in love with, or if you don't really like the direction and what you're trying to or being asked to achieve, everything is going to look like a struggle. Yeah.
Mark, can I come in here?
Sure.
So it's really interesting, this topic, but my thoughts so far is this, okay? You're talking about leading the way rather than micromanaging. I still think there's an element of micromanagement that you still have to do. And let me explain that. Depending on your team around you, if you discover weaknesses with a member of your team, you, as a leader, you got to show them the way forward, motivate them, give some inspiration by spending time with them.
Yep.
And that might involve micromanagement. I'll give you an example, right? Say you're a coach for a soccer team. You're only as good as the players on the pitch. So if you discover there's a weak link in your team, you got to spend more one-to-one with this person, managing them in order to get them to a certain level standard that's equivalent with everyone else.
Yep.
Does that kind of make sense? So that's what I'm kind of thinking. You got to know as a leader the balance. You got to know, be aware, very conscious.
A combination of levels of details that you have there. The micromanager will go down and do the work and or stay there as a long time with the person, longer than they should. The leader will come down, teach them, coach them, and try to get away from doing it as fast as possible. But there's a combination there, and it's a great question, because it's what I wanted to cover next in terms of the expectation of a leader, because sometimes you have to get involved in the details. But let me give you a tip. When you have a larger team, you should get some of the key people in your team to come down and help the weaker people. You shouldn't go and do that by yourself. The reason is this: your best people are your role models. When you keep growing them, they influence everybody else. But if you don't grow your role models and you come down and you help these other people, you're slowing your role models down, which you're preventing your whole organization from growing. Okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
But so, I think, yeah, sorry, carry on.
Go ahead.
I think as a leader, that's where your self-awareness comes into play. If you feel your manager, or let's say call it the middle level of management,
yep,
who's supposed to be a micromanager, is not doing a level job that's, meets your expectations, I think that's when you need to get involved as a leader. And you've got to take people on the journey with you to achieve the common goal.
Exactly.
But I hear what you're saying. I think, yeah, and you've got to be inspirational also. You've got to get to know your team. Make them feel valued.
So let's cover that right on the next slide here. The key thing I found with very, very successful leaders who let go is they're very outcome focused, right? So what they're doing is they're getting people very clear on what they need to achieve. They're asking them the milestones towards achieving it, and they're asking how versus telling how. Now, let's say you have someone junior, you might come down and have to tell them how a little bit, right? But you're not trying to just manage their activities. You're trying to tell them how in terms of achieving an outcome. And so what I found with very good leaders is they're mostly operating at the green level, that level. But if they're coming down and spending too much time in the red level, they have a tendency of doing their people's job. And if you're coming down here, you're more telling and then coaching with the intent that they're going to take that ownership. To be honest, I never managed people at the activity level. I just gave the younger, more inexperienced people a smaller outcome to achieve. And I think that's really the important thing to do, because you want them to think of their own creative ways to make it happen. Because if I'm telling them what to do all the time, then they're not thinking. But if I give them a small outcome to achieve, I give them some ideas of the activities, they can think of other ways to get there faster. Because when we have a clear outcome, we find the shortest way there. When we don't have a clear outcome, we just do what we did yesterday, the day before. So every successful leader is managing at both levels all the time, depending on the capability of their people. But they're always trying to lift it up. Now, when I was leading towards the end of my career, I tried to stay as much as I could at the green level, but I tried to size the outcomes or things that I'm asking my people to achieve to their ability and their level of experience and things like this. But also what I often did is when someone really needed help in very much detail, I tried to get another leader or someone else in the team to help them so that they were closer, available all the time, so that that person could take on board that work and get good at it faster. Okay. So keep in mind this. I'll give you just a quick one. You see the difference between outcome and activity every single day in business, right? Have you ever heard this expression? We need a meeting to discuss something. We need a meeting to discuss. Discussion is an activity. It's not an outcome. A better expression would be is we need a meeting to agree or align on, because there's only 3 outcomes for meetings: decisions, action, and alignment. Okay. So over the years, I found you're going to be much more successful and you're going to create a much faster pace when you can manage people to outcomes and milestones and only drop down to the activities when you need to. And that means they're going to think of faster ways to go make it happen. Okay. Hey, does this make sense in terms of an outcome milestones approach? Yeah. Think of it this way. I've never seen a successful team that didn't have a sense of urgency. And when you make the milestones clear and visible to people, they will take a lot more action on that, and they'll get away from saying, well, okay, I'll pick this up tomorrow morning. They'll finish it before they go home. Okay. So a good thing to think about is that, are you managing milestones and outcomes, or are you managing individual activities? Because when you delegate an activity for people to do, only you own the outcome. When you delegate an outcome for your people to do, now they own it as well. Okay. So if you think about this, the way to implement this outcome type of focus and to keep your people feeling ownership for the achievement in the future, it's to lead with a concept called NIFO. Nose in, fingers out. Okay. Nose in, you're asking questions. You're asking the right questions. They're uncovering the answers by themselves. In other words, your power is not the answer as a leader. Your power is the question. And look at it this way. Let me ask you this question, everybody. If someone doesn't listen to you, how do you feel? How do you feel if someone doesn't listen to you? Type your answer into the chat function. How do you feel if someone doesn't listen to you? So we have frustrated, a lot of frustrated. Wow. Not respected. Yeah. Not valued. See, listening values people. So whenever you're listening to people, they feel more valued. So they're feeling more valued, they're going to help you more. But if you're listening, asking the right questions, they're verbalizing the answer. They're going to take a lot more ownership for what they verbalize than you verbalize. So I'll give you a tip. One of the strongest ways I got my people to take ownership is getting them to verbalize their commitments, but not verbalize the activities they're going to do, but verbalize the steps and the milestones they're going to hit in order to achieve it. Okay. I always tell this story, but when I was leading here in Europe, I often went to various locations. And before I went, I used to call the general manager up and I'd say, who are your superstars? And I wanted to learn from them. So I took the top salesperson out to lunch in that country. And she said something that never left me. She says, I owe all my success in sales to one phrase. If the customer or prospect is talking, I'm winning. It's the same in leadership. If you're asking the right questions, they're going to take a lot more ownership for their ideas, and you're going to force them to really think it through. Now, let's say that they can't get the right answer just through questions. The best way for you to not give them the answer and put your fingers in is to tell a story or an example. A story and example is it's like an indirect tell. It tells people what to do, gives them the context around what to do it, but it's not directly telling them what to do. Also, stories and examples are very interesting because they make things relevant fast. Let me ask you a question. Type into the chat function yes or no. When I told you various stories and examples today, did your mind ever go to a similar experience in your own life? Type your answer into the chat. Did it ever go there? Yeah, you're all saying yes. So stories and examples are a way to make something relevant super quick. So what I found is that if you want your people to own things, it's not tell, it's more of ask, but it's ask plus share, and share stories and examples. It brings it to life. If you want, I can send you a link, and probably I'll do this. I'll send you a link to a very good video about stories and examples, because when you tell data to people, only two parts of the brain light up. When you tell stories and examples to people, all four lobes of the brain light up. In other words, you're engaging people much fuller. Okay. So a great question for you to ask yourself at the end of each week: did I lead NIFO? Was my nose in at the right times? Or am I giving the answer too often? Maybe I have the wrong person, or I need to change my leadership. So a quick tip for you: if you want people to own the future and go faster, your nose has to be in at the milestones. In other words, if your nose is in at the milestones, they say, wow, these milestones are important. But also, that's a coaching opportunity to coach them to go faster in hitting the next few milestones ahead. Okay, so it's a great question, NIFO. Nose in, fingers out. Now, the third thing, in terms of if you really want people to take ownership, is you got to make things much more visible. Okay, I mean, if it's visible, people feel much more accountable. Now, think about this. You have two powers as a leader. You have why power and you have boss power. The more you use the motivational power, and the more you use it, the more it grows stronger you use it. The more you're just telling your people what to do and pushing them, the more your power goes down. So you always need a combination of why power and boss power. But really, what you really need on accountability is the push without pushing, which you see on the right-hand side there, peer pressure. When you make things visible, people feel bad if they let their team member down, or they feel bad if they haven't delivered, because they'll look bad in front of their peers. So visibility drives accountability, because now I'm accountable. It's visible to everybody. I don't do it, I look bad. But if you make people's performance visible and they do a great job and everybody knows about it, they feel tremendous pride. Tremendous pride. I mean, when I made certain things visible in my teams, and I made it visible outside the team, some of my people lived off that pride for a couple months because they did a great job and more people knew about it. And think about it for yourself. If you're in a company and what you did was was great and it was made visible across the company, you're thinking, hey, my career prospects are much better too. So visibility is really key to make sure that you can keep the pace. And think about it this way. If you don't have any peer pressure, all the pressure has to come from you. But when you create an environment with a little bit of peer pressure, you get high performance. Let me give you an instance where this peer pressure is even more positive. Yep. There's a thing about undermining performance. The best, you sometimes get some conflict, but peer pressure does not create conflict. It only makes visible the conflict you couldn't see before that way. Okay. So there's another comment there about what are the best tools to take your fingers out. Best tools I know is keep asking the right questions, but also I always use stories and examples as a shortcut to as an indirect tell that way. But keep in mind this aspect of visibility. You know, visibility is your friend. When I was leading, I was always thinking three things first whenever I took a new job. What is it we need to achieve in the future to create? Who are the key people who are going to really help me because I need to put more investment in them? And third, what can I make visible to drive peer pressure and the feeling of pride? Okay. So, you know, this is very important. Now I'll give you a positive way of this one. You know, one time there was a interview of the former CEO of Colgate. He was in the Marines. And the interviewer said this, well, what's it like leading in business? Isn't the Marines very command and control? He said, I could describe the culture of the Marines with one word, love. He says, we love each other. In other words, we have an affection for each other. We know that if we don't do our job well, our fellow Marine might die. Okay, that's kind of like the emotional side of peer pressure in a very, very positive way. So keep in mind this aspect is that if you want people to go faster and faster together, a lot more things have to be visible. Okay, and that is key. Now, the last one here is this. I often ask people what you want to achieve, and you know what you want to achieve, why you want to achieve it, by when you want to achieve it. What's your next thought? And often they say to me, how? But it's who, right? You always should be thinking who, because if you want to go faster, you thinking how by yourself is slowing the team down. Also, if you think how halfway and then you delegate it to your people, it never feels theirs. And it's going to sound like Dr. Seuss on the right-hand side there, but if you don't have a who, the who is always you. Okay. One of my clients sent me an email and he had the subject line of the email was this one at the bottom. My how is who. He figured out that his how is not how as a leader. He pays his people for how. His how is a who. Empowering the who, aligning the who, giving them a strong target. And then I gave him the Dr. Seuss at the end there. If you don't have a who, the who is always you. So if you think about this, your job as a leader is not so much how, it's who. And it's growing the who so they can take more and more responsibility for the how. Now, the how that you interact with your people should be more outcomes and milestones versus just activities. Because if you have to be managing the activities, you're going to tendency to micromanage that way. So evaluate your who on whether they can take ownership for the outcomes. Because if they can't take ownership for the outcomes, you are destined to be a micromanager forever. Okay. So think about whenever you're thinking, think who. And I'll give you the 3 reasons why you need to think who. If you think how by yourself, your solution is limited to your own knowledge. If you think how too long and too far, when you delegate it, it never feels like your people's. And the 3rd reason is the most important one. Without a who, you can't get rid of it. you're always going to do it. Okay. So those are the 4 key things that I found that enables your people to go faster. Taking an outcome focus and milestones and getting them to own it, leading nose in, fingers out, so they keep owning it, making it visible so that collectively we own it and we're responsible to each other to deliver it. And now the last one, always be thinking who and getting your people involved as soon as possible. Okay. So I'll just stop here a second before I give you some things as a summary at the end. Any comments or questions on things I covered so far? Okay, couple things, and then I'll open it up at the end for anything else. Remember, you have to empower versus control. Now, here's a great chart to think about. Well, first is sort of the illustrations here is that you got to get your people to own the future with you, which means you have to give power to gain it, and you have to be clear on where you're heading. So if you're very clear on where you're heading and you're giving them power and ownership of those outcomes and milestones, they're going to help you to get you there faster. But here is the real key chart I wanted to share with you, is this one. You have to focus on delegating decisions. It's not enough just to delegate the outcomes. You need to give people also the right to make decisions along this way as well. So think about this 3 levels. If you're delegating activities, that's micromanagement. Only you own the achievement. They're just doing it for you. When you delegate outcomes and milestones, your people are owning the achievement. But when you delegate decisions, your people start to own the future with you. So I'll give you a great tip I used to use in leadership is I had my organization chart in front of me. And next to each key people in my organization, I wrote the decisions that I wanted them to be making in the next 6 months. In other words, I need to start either letting go more, educating more, whatever. But I said to myself, within 6 months, I no longer want to be making those decisions, right? And so keep in mind this aspect of that you're not truly delegating and getting people owning the future without also allowing people to make the decisions that are associated with those outcomes. And if you think about what will make your life infinitely easier, especially if you're running your own company, is you need to grow your business judgment pipeline. In other words, look at the way they say, if you lose people who can make decisions, you're going to lose personal life. In other words, you need to be investing in people and being able to delegate decisions downward so that when you lose someone at one level, then the person can step into the next level as well. And I'll give you an instance here. Let's say that you have a person in your team, you trust 90% to make great decisions, right? They'll be able to operate fast. They leave the company tomorrow. On Monday morning, the person you can directly replace them with, you only trust 30%. How does Monday morning look? Not very good, right? And only one person changed, right? And if that's because a key person around you, now you're involved a hell of a lot more because you can't let go of decisions. So as you climb, a lot of times you get involved in the activities, but as you climb, your job is to delegate decisions. But now if you can't trust them at level to make a decision, you can't make a decision with no information. You need to drop down and do part of that person's job in order to decide for them. So I would like you to ask yourself in your organization, how strong is your business judgment pipeline? How strong do you have decision makers at each level in order for them, could they step up and take on the bigger role and you would trust them to make those decisions? That means that you got to be having people that let go at each level of your organization, or else you'll never create and maintain a strong pipeline. So that's very, very important. Remember this: whenever you lose people who can make decisions, you lose personal life. Okay. So that's some ideas. I just give you quickly, and then open up for any other questions at the end where I can help. I mean, my job is helping people to go faster. And so my mentoring is for you to become the leader you want to be in the future. But you don't become that leader without either changing a mindset or changing a habit. Okay. And I'll tell you, I've been coaching a person in Germany for the past number of months who has his own company. And the biggest change they started with in terms of the habit was asking more questions and asking the right questions and letting his people take more ownership for the answers versus giving the answer. That's a huge thing to change. So I'd say if you take anything away from today, is that as a leader, you have to be asking more questions, but better questions. And as a leader, you're going to ask, I'll tell you, you're going to be much more productive when you ask the right questions, because the conversations will get shorter if you ask the right questions too. So this is the way I can help. And the one key thing I wanted to share with you, and I got this feedback a couple weeks ago and so forth, is I don't know about you, but I try to keep things very clear and very simple. And because there's one particular reason why. If it's clear and simple, you can make it a habit. If it's complicated, you're never going to be able to make it as a daily and weekly habit. The accumulation of daily and weekly habits is what's going to drive your leadership success faster. Okay. And if I would say one thing to remember was the questions, the other thing to remember is to use stories and examples to get people and what you say relevant quickly. Okay. So hopefully you take some ideas away here. I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to share these. And we have a few minutes left. I'll shut down the screen and open up for any questions, comments on what we covered today. So I can see everybody's faces and or names here. Any comments or questions on what we covered today?
Yeah. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Claudia.
So one comment that
Yep.
I found very useful. You said that we should think like, when we think about delegating, we should think about, I don't want to be making these decisions in 6 months. So I think I personally tend to think I need to delegate this, but I don't think it's in concrete questions. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah.
if you think just like something very global, it will never happen.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a very good tip to think in specific situations. I don't want to be making this kind of decisions in this time.
It's a very good point. And I'll tell you, you get there faster. And this is the way I got there. I took a month and I wrote down all the decisions I was making. And I said, and then I looked at the list and I said, there's some of these that I shouldn't be making anymore. Okay. And that was kind of like my raw materials to decide on those things. And so sometimes, you know, the world goes by so fast and everything, and we don't register something unless we reflect on and we do some tracking of that. I'll give you an example. Today, I went out for a walk for a couple hours in the morning today, and I was listening to a book on being a better golfer and using your mind and everything. And he says, just write down whatever you think for a week. And then you start to understand all these thoughts that you're consciously making, but you're telling your subconscious mind. So I think about it sometimes, if you're not reflecting as a leader, you're not understanding how you can change. And the biggest thing that will drive a change in your leadership is, Claudia, you mentioned there, is decisions. If you can let go of decisions, speed is going to happen. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Anybody? I got a question for everybody. I'd like each of you to type into the chat function your number one takeaway from today. The number one thing that you can use that would help you to be a stronger leader. Okay. So NIFO. Yeah, think who. Think who as much as you can. If you don't have a who, the who is you. The right questions. Yeah, boys. Delegate decisions. Yeah. I'll tell you, you try that. Try make a list of all the decisions that you've been making, and then at the end of a couple weeks say, hey, which ones I don't really want to be making anymore, and how do I enable people to do it? Yeah. Yeah, forget meetings to discuss. Meetings are to agree or align on, not to discuss. That's for sure. I'll tell you, if you do that, you're going to make a big difference in the organization, because basically running poor meetings equals wasting people's time. And the fastest way to demotivate, especially a hybrid organization, is to have people attend poor meetings, because when people attend a poor meeting, they're not shy about it afterwards. They'll go tell their coworkers, another stupid meeting from such and such. And then you'll get known for running stupid meetings, and no one will want to come to them. Yeah. And I'll give you a tip. I was very successful in driving change and everything because of two things. One, I ran very structured meetings, so time wasn't wasted. And second, I developed very, very strong relationships with peers across the company so that I could fight for getting the best people into the meetings. Because when you get the best people in, when they leave the meeting, people listen to them. Okay. So any other comments, questions from what we covered today? Useful hour? Yeah. Good. You'll all get a copy of the recording. You'll get a copy of the slides, and you'll get a handout, which is a good summary of all this that you can use as a reference. Okay. So thank you very much. I wish everybody a very good finish to your day, a good finish to your week, and a great, very, very successful remainder of 2022. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Mark.